Hi everyone, welcome. Today's demo is all about the tuck stitch. We're going to be looking at 4 different variations that you can use in a multitude of your own designs. Let's get started. So first we're going to look at just casting on, and you want to ensure a couple of things. You want your ribber bed to be in the P position, so needles directly on top of one another, not crossed. And in the center, so in this machine the center is 5. And then make your needle selection a 1 by 1 selection. So if it's done correctly, the P position means that the needle on the ribber will be directly in between the needle on the main bed. And when you're doing your selection, it's always good practice to have the main bed needle be on the outside and the ribber bed needle be on the inside on either end. So when you've selected the number of needles that you want, make sure that they're in the B position, ready position, and insert your scrap yarn. First, I'm demonstrating a cast on, and we are using scrap yarn here. So it's pretty tight for the first row, 1 passage across, and then you can insert your comb. Making sure the comb goes right into the center is going to allow the weight to be distributed evenly, and that really helps to knit smoothly. Then make sure you put a weight right into the center. In this example, I'm doing about 30 needles on either side. Take the carriage back, all needles, and then select the ribber bed to knit 3 rows. While the main bed is not knitting. After 3 rows, all needles knit once again, so you need to deselect those part buttons and take your passage 1 across. Then slide your ribber carriage back and forth to drop the ribber bed, and you can see that's the scrap cast on complete. Now we can go ahead and put in our good yarn. So I like to tie a knot. It helps to smoothly pass the yarn down underneath the machine and keep some weight on it. So insert your good yarn, and then when you're ready, make sure your tension is nice and tight for your first passage. This is a rib 1 by 1 cast on. After 1 row all needles, you're going to select tubular. We're going to be knitting 3 rows, and the top you want to knit first, followed by the bottom and the top again. Now this is considered the first row, so you can put your counter, reset it to 0, and then after your reset you want to select the tension on your ribber carriage that best matches your yarn gauge. This I can keep pretty tight, and I'm going to knit the number of rows for my 1 by 1 rib. Now I'm also going to show you in this video how to increase on a double bed. This can be helpful for a multitude of things. So when you're increasing on a double bed, in this situation, you have every other needle working. So I'm using the 3 needle transfer tool. And if I just moved it 1 over, you'll see that there's only 2 needles on the inside, but we need to create that 1 by 1 selection. So you actually have to move them over twice. And then once you do that on the main and the ribber bed, you'll have 1 empty needle that matches your 1 by 1 selection. So this is actually increasing by 1. Then the best thing to do to ensure that you don't have a hole is split your loop to fill in that empty needle. So you can see again here from a different angle what we've done. Once again, I usually do this in 2 steps because it's a little difficult to stretch the knit over too far all at once. So the first one will give me 2 empty needles, and then I'll move it once more before splitting the loop, which is the purl part of the knit, splitting it up and down in order to fill in those empty needles. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and knit however many rows you need. Again, this is increasing on a double bed, and if you're doing an entire sweater with a 1x1 rib or a sleeve, likely you'll need to shape that piece, and so this is a great way, a visual way to show you how to do so. You can see just one more time here how we're doing it. If you're not comfortable with the 3 needle transfer tool, you can absolutely do it one at a time. It might be a little bit slower, but as you get more comfortable, you'll be able to use the transfer tools with more needles. I really recommend that you give this a try, and you'll find it quite helpful for a lot of different designs that you're creating. And when you're first practicing, it is really great to do it with a yarn that is a single ply, standard gauge yarn. So that means it doesn't have 3 or 4 ends twisted together, because it can get really tricky when you're trying to transfer and learn on yarn that splits apart quite easily. So give it a go. I hope that you'll be able to utilize that in some of your designs. And now we're going to look at the first tuck design pattern that you can create really easily by selecting needles and deselecting needles. Here we're going to knit 2 rows and then we're going to tuck 2 rows. But what we're going to do is actually split and fill in all needles on the main ribber using the purl stitch from the ribber needles. So you can see I'm going across. I've put all the needles in working position on the main bed, and then I'm taking each one selected ribber needle and splitting that loop so the purl part of the knit will lift up to fill in the space on the main bed. Do that for the entirety of the swatch. As you can see, the transfer tool is helping me lift and split the loop from the ribber up to the main bed carriage. Once you've gone fully across, you can see a nice close-up here. The main bed will be all needles now in work, and the ribber will be 1x1 selection. So now when you consider the tension, you'll want your main bed to have a stockinette tension, and the ribber can actually remain tighter because it is every other needle selected. Now we're going to knit 2 rows for this pattern. And then you're going to follow that by tucking 2 rows on your ribber. So on the Brother machine, that means selecting the part buttons as well as the center button that activates the tuck. If you look close up, a tuck is actually the yarn carrying over the needle, but not dropping the loop and knitting. So it almost looks like a V. You can do that for 2 rows and then repeat by deselecting and knitting all needles 2 rows once again. This is a really simple knit 2, tuck 2 variation, and it'll give some beautiful 3-dimensional design to your swatch. Repeat for as many rows as desired for your swatch in order to calculate and create a final product. For swatches, I always recommend at least 40 to 50 rows. Make sure you're using and resetting your row counter, and keep track of the tension and the number of needles as well. That is what you're going to need in order to calculate from your swatch to a final piece. Now for the next tuck option, I've just put 2 rows of an accent color in order to see the difference on the swatch. This one is going to select tuck on the ribber in one direction only, and then you can just knit continuously and you don't have to change your button selection on your main or your ribber carriage. So in this example, I'm going to be tucking when I move my carriage from the right to the left. You'll see if you look close up that it's knitting in one direction and then tucking in the other. Again, the tuck, the yarn will carry over on the ribber, and then the knit, both needle beds on the way back. And this is really great. You don't have to change any selection, just knit as many rows as desired for your sample. The next pattern design, we're going to transfer some more needles on here for another effect. You're going to transfer every 5th needle on the main bed. And now this is just going to be more of an open work design. So counting 4 needles in work and then transferring 1 needle over. You can choose left or right, whichever way you want to transfer that needle. And keep it open. So that means take the needle that is now empty and push it back into the non-working position. Do that all the way across your swatch. Another great thing you could do if you have the plating tool is insert the plating tool and add a secondary color. The plating tool, additional to any tuck variation, will give a beautiful color contrast, and you don't have to do anything additional but change your sinker plate to the plating tool. It's very easy and a beautiful way to create some variation. So here you can see on the top 4 needles in work, and then we've pushed back every 5th needle into the non-working position. Now you're going to select the tuck, once again in one direction only on your ribber carriage. Make sure you reset your row counter and go ahead and knit as many rows as you want for your swatch. You can see up close it looks more of an open work design now because we have those needles not working in the main ribber. This also creates a beautiful effect. In this last example, we're going to transfer some more needles and create an even more open work by transferring every 3rd needle on the ribber. You're going to repeat that first example of knitting 2 and tucking 2. So you'll see I'm going to transfer now on the ribber bed. Again, you can choose whichever direction you'd like. I'm going to bring them up and empty that needle on the ribber up to the main carriage. So those needles that already have a working loop on them will have a secondary knit, and that is completely okay. For the first row, it's totally fine. Repeat this along the entirety of your swatch. Once you're done transferring, just have a good look and make sure that everything is looking even. Sometimes with the open work, it can be a little confusing, so just check. The easiest way is to look at the butt ends, so the B position, and just check that you've counted everything and it's identical all the way across your swatch. You wouldn't want one random needle that you didn't transfer to take your design off course. So then I just knit 2 rows, and then I repeat and tuck 2 rows on the ribber carriage. Going back and forth, again, resetting your row counter and moving back and forth, knit 2, tuck 2 in that simple variation. You can see from a bird's eye view, this is an even more open work. So we're moving from more selected to more deselected in this last example. It's a beautiful and simple way to create some lovely interest on your swatch. The last thing I want to demonstrate is just casting off. So whenever we cast off, we move all of our working needles to the main bed. And then the cast off method is really up to you. Now, normally when you have such a three-dimensional knit, such as this, I would recommend a loop through loop or crochet. It's called cast off. And that's what I'll be demonstrating here today. Transfer all the needles from the ribber to the main bed, and then you can drop your ribber down in order to cast off. And you get to see just a preview of some of that beautiful tuck stitch design. Now, when you're doing a crochet cast off, it's great to do one row of stockinette, and you want to at least double your tension so you have a nice loose loop for the stockinette. So go ahead and change the sinker plate and increase your tension by 2 times. In this example, I'm going up to almost 8. And then just take the carriage across one row. Now for the crochet cast off, you can break the yarn away from the carriage with enough length at one end. And you're going to need a spare needle or the needle latch tool in order to do the crochet cast off. Unfortunately, I forgot one needle, so I'll go ahead and fix that during the cast off. Now, what's important is you want to actually move from the direction of the closed loop towards the open end of yarn. So since I finished with the open end on the left side, I am going to be crochet casting off from the right to the left. Now, how to do this? You want the latch tool to take the first loop and go beyond the latch, and then insert the tool into the next loop and keep it in between the hook and the latch. Then you can drop it from the machine and loop through. It's exactly like a crochet method. You are taking one loop and bringing it through and under the second loop that is at the end of the tool. This is going to create a loop through loop, cast off, closed finish. Now for the last one, you can take the end and pull all the way through and it will close the work. And here is the final result, the beautiful 1x1 increase followed by the 4 tuck stitch variations we did. This is the main or the face, but if you flip it over, you can see it's also got a beautiful pattern on the back or the technically wrong side. Either way, these all look great. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about what you can do with the tuck stitch, and I will see you in the next demo. Thanks for watching.